there preparing.
Yeah, haven't seen it yet. I'm scrolling and rebooting, and I didn't get notifications. But that was Christina. Yeah. Oh yeah, you. It says it was a message you're sending, broadcasting directly now. So where is it? There it is. Now it's on.
Yay! We are here live on Facebook. The International Choral Conductors Federation's panel discussion on choirs and COVID-19. Apologies that we're a little bit late getting started. We had a few technical hitches, but we are here now. If you're not familiar with the International Choral Conductors Federation, then you should know that ICCF is a new organisation. It's been created to create a network of choral professionals, a true international network where we can connect with each other, exchange ideas, learn from each other, and nurture the younger conductors that are starting their careers as well. Wonderful aims and a wonderful group of people who are putting this organisation together.
Indeed, today, Mark, could you please record this session? Because I think other people would like to see it afterwards.
It should, and oh yes, I do need to record to the cloud, I suppose, on the computer. I don't know, to the cloud or on the computer? What do you think?
The computer. Do it on the computer.
So now we're being recorded as well. We've all lived through 2 years of a pandemic, which has created havoc on our choral programs and created great disruption to the activities of choral conductors all around the world. So we thought it would be useful to get an international perspective on how people are feeling about this, as well as to look at some of the challenges facing choirs and choral conductors in the many places around the world where choirs are active. So we have gathered together a wonderful panel of people who interact with choirs of many different types in many different situations. We have Thomas Caplin from Norway. We have Tracy Wong from Canada and Malaysia. And we have Amy Bebbington from the UK. I might let them introduce themselves just to create some context for our discussions so that we can know sort of the areas that they move in, the sort of choirs that they might have been interacting with, which will help us as we explore some of these issues. Thomas, to you first.
Normally it's the ladies first, but okay. Women and children first, but okay. I'll go this time. Yes, well, Thomas is my name, as you heard, and I live and work in Norway. Norway has been, I would say, been treated very nicely by the pandemic, really, and we haven't suffered at all as many of my colleagues. I've been in touch with most of my colleagues around the world during the pandemic, and I can see that we have been blessed in our situation here. So we've had, of course, limitations, mitigations, and all those stuff, but more or less we are totally out of it. So there's nothing here in Norway now at the moment limiting choral life. So, and my youth choir has been working more or less under the radar of everything. So we've been fortunate enough to be able to work continuously during the pandemic, more or less.
Great. Tracy, would you like to introduce yourself and give us some context for your work?
Hi, everyone. I'm Tracy Wong. I am originally from Malaysia, and I'm currently in Toronto, Canada, and I've been here for almost 9 years now. I usually work with university choirs, and this is the same throughout the pandemic. And I also have a youth choir in the community that I conduct. And besides that, I'm a composer and a music educator and advocate for diverse choral repertoire, as well as Malaysian and Canadian choral composers. Just a quick summary of things that are happening in Canada. The situation really depends on whether a choir is within an institution like a university or school or in the community. And it also depends from province to province because provincial guidelines differ from, say, federal guidelines. So I can explain a little bit more about that as we go through our chat. And I can turn it over to Amy now.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm Amy Bebbington. It's really nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Mark. I'm a freelance choral director. I live in Surrey, which is on the outskirts of London in the UK. I'm the director of training for ABCD, which is the Association of British Choral Directors. We are getting back to live face-to-face training now, which is really excellent, and also doing a little bit of hybrid as well, so keeping some things online. But activity is definitely resuming for ABCD, which is really healthy and good news. I direct lots of different choirs. I've just been working this morning, competing with my choral society. I have a mixed voice chamber choir. I have an upper voice girls choir in a secondary school. I've got a workplace choir in a law firm. And I also work with a professional upper voice ensemble called Choral Sound. So lots of different kinds of choirs, which is the way I like it. And I'm very passionate about empathetic choral leadership, musicianship training, and Dalcros. That's me.
Fantastic. That's great. Well, I guess perhaps the first question that we might explore a little bit is just what do we think about how are choral conductors feeling at the moment? I know that for many of us, when we are working with our communities, there's an imperative to remain very positive and very upbeat about what we've been going through and what we're facing at the moment. But I think sometimes that hides a real and perhaps important discussion as to how people are actually feeling and how choral conductors are coping with the changes that have been made and the interruptions to their programs. Tracy, would you like to give us your thoughts on that?
Sure. So how conductors are feeling now slightly differs from how everyone felt at the start of the pandemic, for sure. I think everyone is more hopeful because things are around the bend. There's vaccines. We have more specific guidelines in place that we can follow because that really helps manage expectations. And there is definitely more, everyone's feeling more inspired now that spring is here and things are warmer. So many things are working in the hopefully right direction. Conductors are more knowledgeable about setup of space, everything that is non-artistic. We ended up needing to force ourselves to learn. We feel more supported by our provincial organizations, various choral organizations, the government, community, families, funding people and sponsors. There is a sense of renewed hope, yet cautious because anything could happen again. We still feel mental fatigue because although we're going back to concerts, there's a lot of if-then processes that need to happen more than usual. And we carry more of that burden on us. And we'll be lucky. I'll be lucky personally if 30% of my job is just music alone. I believe we are definitely so much more creative now than before, trying to mitigate various situations that may happen. We have plan A, B, C, D, E, whatever it takes to get things going. And we are so much more mindful of thinking of if someone is not here, how can we replace that person? Or is there a sub available for a soloist? Is there a sub available for a pianist? Is there a sub available for me? We never thought about things like that. And I would have only one or two people that is my go-to call who would conduct a concert the way I would be conducting it. So we would never have thought about this before, but that's the situation now. Yeah.
And Amy, I imagine with your work with the training conductors, you've come across quite a few. How are they feeling that you've been able to ascertain anyway?
I think many of us are feeling quite weary because of exactly what Tracy was saying. I mean, Tracy, you talked about many, many positives there, and I echo all of those things. So out of adversity, there has come, some positive outcomes, which is great. But I do think, having just had COVID for a second time, I think many musical directors are feeling the pressure. We're feeling quite weary. We're feeling fatigued, not just physically, but mentally as well, because the preparation to do what we did so easily before COVID is taking much longer now. It's much more of an intense process, and having to manage and juggle the expectations of our choirs, our singers, and our audiences as well. There's many more things to think about and consider. I also think that choral leaders are reassessing their roles and who they are and what they want in their careers. Excuse me, sorry. COVID phlegm, that was what was talked about this morning, COVID phlegm in the competition. There's a lot of unpredictability still around choral singing because COVID is still here. There is great unpredictability. This morning I was just conducting in a competition, and it also happened yesterday as well. Some of the choirs were reduced to 11 members, but they still performed, they still competed. They were down, I don't know, a similar number, 11, 12, 13 people couldn't make it. So we're constantly having to fight fires and juggle and reassess. And I think it's a difficult time still, even though we are getting back in the saddle, we're making things happen, real life events are coming back again. There is a great positivity surrounding live performance, which is very healthy. Nevertheless, there are still many hurdles and barriers to what we need to create and how we need to create it.
Thomas, any thoughts from you on I guess how conductors are feeling in your part of the world? Nope, I think you're muted there, Thomas.
In my situation, in our situation where we are right now, I find it very interesting to talk about how we are feeling. But I find it fascinating also that our brains are equipped in some very interesting ways. First of all, before the pandemic, when we try to do something new, in many amateur choirs, there is a natural resistance of doing novelties, new things. We want to do the things the way we've always done them, because that's secure, that's nice. We know that. We know what we are, where we are, what we're doing. There's a security in that. And then the pandemic came, and then it forced new ways of thinking, new ways of working, which I also echo have brought with it some very, very positive effects. Now I see here in Norway, since we have been working absolutely normally for this part since January, everything's been absolutely back to normal. So what is normal then? It is very interesting to see. If you ask me how conductors are feeling here now, it seems that everyone has forgotten about the pandemic. That's a very positive thing with our brain. We forget about misery.
Lucky you.
Yeah, no, but people do that. You will also experience this. This is why I'm saying this, because in a few months' time, if we would be sitting here in 6 months' time, we probably would discuss this from a totally different perspective. We won't remember really those hard times, and that's the very positive thing we have with our brain, that it tends to forget those things and put it away. Luckily, it does. The awkward thing about that is that all the positive things that we have invented, new things, new methodologies, they are also forgotten. So basically, many of the choirs that I know and choral conductors, they are back to working with their choirs as they were 4 years ago. In other words, we've learned nothing or very little. This is what I think is one of the biggest challenges now, where we are right now in this situation. How do we benefit from this situation? How do we extract all the positive things that actually can change our way of thinking about choral leadership? Because choral leadership per se, to my view, is a preservation of history, of how things have been done as a choral leader for centuries. So I think this, for me, this was a blessing in disguise. Thank you that we can now finally look at choral leadership in a new way, where we can discover new ways of working and utilizing technology, digital tools and everything. Fantastic, I thought, because that's how I like to think. But now I see that people go back to where they were. And that is, so the positive, the two sides of this coin. The positive thing that we actually forget the bad things also means that we also forget maybe what the positive things that came with the bad things.
Yeah, we're going to explore that actually, what we might take out of this pandemic moving forward a little bit later. Did you want to say something there, Amy?
I wanted to ask Thomas, so you work predominantly with your Defrost Youth Choir. Do you think that you feel like we've gone backwards, or we want to recreate what we had in the past because people want to work live, face-to-face, in-person rehearsals and keep the rehearsal etiquette and the musicianship all live? Do you think that's what they want to create, that community feel? Do you think that's why they want to go back to that? Because I think that's a positive.
Yes.
Because the community and the face-to-face activity is socially exemplary, isn't it? That's what we want. We want people to be together and to engage and to react and to be spontaneous with the live music making. So that's what we want, right? But I suppose your young singers would embrace the technology really nicely. My older choirs, so.
Well, can I just say, we're going to, this actually discussion leads us pretty neatly to my next question, which is how are singers feeling at the moment? I run a children's choir, and one of my 14-year-olds said to me at Thursday rehearsal last week, she said, COVID's ruined my life. And feeling very unhappy about the changes to the choral program, the opportunities that they were going to have. We had a big tour to Europe planned for 2020. That didn't happen, of course, and lots of other things. But I thought that was a little bit of a sad thing, but I'm actually seeing that a lot in sort of that age group. Mind you, I have a choir of people in their 20s as well, and they are absolutely delighted at the moment because they can actually do things again. So different feelings from different choirs. And I guess it depends a little bit on the context of the choir and how much, I suppose, damage the choir has had as a result of COVID. Tracy, would you like to speak to that?
Sure. On the question of how our singers feeling, I think to a certain extent, what the singers feel mirrors what the choral leaders are feeling. So if we are feeling a certain way as a choral leader, then it transfers to the community and it transfers to the choir. So that's part of the main thing that I would see if I walk into a room, or if I'm looking at a community choir or any choir for that matter, and the relationship with the choral leader in front of them. But I'm also mindful of the various privileges a choir or a conductor or a singer may have in their environment, because that affects their feeling. Not everyone would have access to technology the way we would like it, or would have familiar support in their immediate environment to actually have access to it. And how are they going to tune in? We're also looking at access to finances and other resources that may support their success and their learning during the pandemic. So it entirely varies depending on a person, a community, a situation, and the leader themselves. So it has so many factors, and it's a deeper level of empathy that is needed in order to really assist and support our singers during this time. Of course, back then singers are worried and there's mental fatigue and there's frustration. I cannot say that every young person loves technology because they have issues trying to log on to basic things as well. But I do know that singers right now are more encouraged. They are more knowledgeable. They will tell me where to press on Zoom, which is fantastic. Everyone's more supportive and patient of any glitches that may happen nowadays. And I would like to say that we are generally more hopeful, and we will take on as many adversities come what may at this time. We just need the support. Yeah.
I'd like to agree with you about young people in technology. Very few of my young singers actually liked the online and the technological experience. It's not that they're not familiar with it. It's not that they don't have access to it, but they know what choir is. And they say, look, we had lovely time with you on Zoom, but it's not choir. And we don't want to do that anymore. And I completely understand that because I felt the same. We had provided some great, I guess, music classes, music educational experiences for them, for our singers online, but it wasn't choir. Now, maybe that's perhaps a very narrow and, Thomas might say, old school thinking definition of choir, and that may well be true, and maybe that's why they think it, because that's reflected in the way I feel. But that's interesting. Amy, what are your thoughts on how you obviously come across a wide range of singers from the types of choirs that you're working with? How are they feeling at the moment?
I think I would echo what Tracy said. I think it's a very situational thing, and singers approach the safety of singing in a choir in their own way. The school that I work in were very positive about proactive singing and making things happen. So that was encouraging. We had a large enough rehearsal space and good air conditioning and good ventilation, and singers, if they wanted to, wore masks. So choir happened when it could. So that was a healthy experience. My choral society were very gung-ho. So even though they were mostly in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, they were more sort of small community, village community minded. So they knew everyone and they felt confident and they felt safe enough. And so they'd go to choir because they've been going to choir for the last 50 years and no one was going to stop them. That sort of attitude. So I was really encouraged by that. We haven't had many people with COVID, which has been great. Again, we're mitigating risks and following all the procedures and things, but they were so desperate to sing. They didn't want to do Zoom, they wanted to sing, and so we sang. We met when we were able. I think the most difficult thing is when you're working towards a performance and all of a sudden you lose 3 tenors, or your very best soprano, or your soloist who was going to do 3 solos in the bass line, that sort of thing. That just managing that is really difficult. But you need to keep the channels of communication open, and as Tracy was saying, you need to reassess your empathy when you're dealing with singers, when they email you or they phone you or whatever and say, I've got COVID, or I've got a little sniffle and I don't feel I can sing in the performance because I've got a little sniffle. Like everyone deals with how they're feeling in their own way, and you can't impress upon anyone to be there to deliver. You just have to roll with it, and be patient and be understanding. But I think deep down, singers are desperate to sing. They're desperate for that live performance. And of the handful of live performances I've done over the last however many months, all of them have been life-changing for me. And I know that they're life-changing for my singers as well. Live performance all of a sudden means so much more. That's just what I've had recently. So I think there is a keenness to get back in the saddle, but also a reluctance in some way to wholeheartedly commit.
Yeah. Let's move on to our next, but quite related area to explore, which is how have our programs changed as a result of some of these things that Amy was just talking about, and how do we deal with this? So many issues around this. In Australia at the moment, we still have a mandatory isolation rule, so that if somebody in your family, in your household contracts COVID, everybody in the household has to isolate for 7 days. So we are finding a very constant stream of absences from all of our groups, all age groups, which just means that, well, amongst other things, that music that may have taken us, I don't know, 4 weeks to learn previously is taking a lot longer than that. And then there's no guarantee when you get to performance that you will have all parts covered. I'm fortunate that most of my choirs are fairly large, so we're sort of surviving so far. We have put 2 conductors with each group at the moment for this reason. So that's one way, I guess, that we are coping with some of these challenges. Tracy, how are your programs changing in terms of your rehearsal process and your approach to performances? And yeah, what are some of the things that you're doing to help with that?
I would have to say there is a heightened awareness and empathy of the needs of singers during this time, because for me personally, if the program is student-centered or singer-centered, then everything would work well in service of the singers and the music. So being fluid enough with understanding what the needs of the singers are and how it affects their whole self-inquiry that we may not see when they step out of choir, like personal struggles, home environment, school, social life. And also like what Amy mentioned, what if someone says they have a sniffle? Do we tell them to attend? If we think it's okay, other people in the choir may not find it's okay. So again, we're managing expectations in a program still. And there is, I feel, more flexibility that's needed in preparation of a variety of what if situations. I count myself really lucky because the choirs that I conduct all have assistant conductors. But 1 week before a concert, now I would email the assistant and say, take this as the official statement from me. If I do go into isolation next week, you are up, because who else is going to do it? Or if a tenor suddenly is not available for a quartet, you're up. Who else is going to do it? Do I Barbara Hannigan my way through a choir? I don't know. So we have to figure things out ourselves. There is more resourcefulness that's required to run programs. We start looking for more financial support in areas that we normally wouldn't consider. How do we do a choir marathon and a fundraiser? It's so different now. How do we look for administrative support? What are the kinds of administrative support do we need? Now we need more tech support for sure. And how do we go about recruitment now when we're rebuilding our choir? When the numbers are smaller, how do we make these community connections? So overall, there is more creative considerations that's needed in order to continue to move our program, I won't say forward, but to sustain our program from a different perspective. If there's anyone who can survive a difficult challenge, it's usually artists, because we are so used to being told no that we are always finding ways to say, to have a yes in our system. So that's why I am still hanging on to hope, because if anyone is resilient, they are the artists.
Before I move that question around a little bit, it just occurred to me to ask about policies that you might have around vaccinations in choirs. It's been a little controversial here. Some of our adult choir has a mandatory vaccination policy. Our children's choir did. and we've just relaxed that. So I'm curious to hear what the situation is in other places, and what's the situation in the UK with this? Nope, I think you're muted there.
There was quite a bit of debate on the ABCD Facebook page about this several months ago, and it related to GDPR as well. And how can you say you can only attend my choir rehearsal if you have been fully vaccinated? And, you know, it was a really, really difficult thing to uphold. I don't know what the general outcome was of that discussion. But I don't have that with any of my choirs, because none of my committees decided to go down that route, and it wasn't spoken about. And I honestly think that everyone in my choirs has been vaccinated and had the booster and everything. And I think people are generally going down that route, but if they decide they're not going to have it, then they're not going to have it. So
Okay.
in my choirs, there hasn't been a policy to say you must be vaccinated.
Okay, that's interesting. Thomas, has this been an issue where you are?
Not really, no. The same kind of discussions that you refer to, Amy, have been also in Norway, but not as loud as I saw them on the ABCD Facebook page. Okay. So, but then that is also probably due to that. I think we were quite earlier with the vaccination program as well. And if I would say something about my youth choir Defrost, I mean, for example, there are of course young singers who haven't had their third shot yet. On the other hand, 100% of my singers have had COVID. So that is what if we talk about herd immunity, that has always been the ambition here as well, to let it go, get it, and be done with it.
And we've had a very different experience,
Yeah, so I mean, so no one is thinking about vaccination here anymore. Just people are kind of saying it's fine if I get it, fine. Then I'm more immune than I was before, and I don't have to take the next shot unless I'm over 80. Then I should probably take the fourth shot as well. But so no, most people I know, I don't think I know anyone who hasn't had COVID. And that was a similar situation with the Omicron, that is. And that was the same situation that Michael Barrett referred to when he said that in South Africa, no one is bothering about Omicron because everyone has had it.
Okay. Tracy, what about in your part of the world?
At the universities and the community choir that I teach, we have mandates coming from either the board of directors for the community choir, or of course from the university, because it extends across campus. So we do follow all the mandates and the regulations within our jurisdiction and within our community for everyone's safety. For schools, obviously it's a different thing. In public schools and various other community choirs, it's entirely up to what the governing body or the board decides. Of course, there are pushbacks from people who feel that, why should you be telling me to do this? Very similar to Amy's situation. And we're just wanting to sing. If not, then we'll take our business elsewhere. So we have a variety of very frustrating situations that we have to constantly mitigate with people. Yeah. So it's situational.
Okay, interesting to hear those perspectives. I guess not dissimilar to here in Australia.
Mark, could I just say something very shortly about, because you asked about changing the programs and learning from the experience. I mean, one thing that I have learned, and that is an extremely good idea, because as a teacher at university and I have a university choir, And many of these new students, many of them have never sung in choirs before. So what I learned, what I had to do for the 2 years, I will now continue to do. And that is that the choir will not be assembled as a choir until after the fall vacation, fall holiday, which is in October. So they will go 5 or 6 weeks. And that's where they will work in smaller groups that are conducted by my students who are also in the conducting training program. So I'm killing 2 birds with 1 stone. They get a free practice working with these groups where they have to teach them the stuff digitally or in real life. And then they have to then every singer in this small group have to record their part, as we did during the pandemic, creating, and they work with the same song, all groups. So that when we come back from the fall holiday, we come together, and then they are really, really happy. And that happiness is so much bigger than the happiness that would be spread out for 6 weeks. I can tell you, they are so unbelievably happy, and they really long to start singing. I say, okay, we all know this song. Should we sing it together? And we start, and they sing. And my God, that is a boost for them. So this is what I'm going to continue to do, because there are so many good aims achieved by this, because every singer has to, from the very beginning, in a choir of 70 people, understand that this choir depends on my voice, what I do with my voice, how I know the music and how I perform it. And this is what I get from the very beginning. They understand this from the beginning, and they take it with them when I work in plenum, in the plenary session, in the full choir, which I think is fantastic.
That's a great example of how your program has changed as
Really?
a result of COVID, and something that you like. Amy, I mean, I'm sure there are lots of changes to the programs, but anything spring to mind to share?
The last program I did with my chamber choir went really, really well. We only sang 6 pieces, however. 6 of them were new, and they were actually called the Corona Composer pieces, because when COVID first struck 2 years ago, we issued a call for scores. So that was one of the things that the chamber choir did. We issued a call for scores, and we got many dozens of scores as entries, and we picked 6 winners. And just a few weeks ago, we performed those 6 winning compositions. And in the second half, we did a theme of sound, stillness, silence. And there were 6 pieces in the second half as well. Ordinarily, we would have done a more ambitious program, a bigger program. And we needed every ounce, every minute of every rehearsal to get over the finish line. So that's 2.5 months. And it's a very good chamber choir, so ordinarily my expectation for them would have been higher, but we now need to take longer with choirs because we don't have full attendance every week. There are ups and downs. Obviously, I had COVID for a second time, so I missed a key rehearsal and came back to work really sooner than I should have done, etc., etc. But we managed to get it over the finish line. And yeah, I would say the things that I'm thinking about changing with choirs is reducing performances to a 1 session performance, so no interval, just an hour usually, which I think works really nicely for everyone. Audiences like it, singers like it. We can go and have a curry and a glass of wine afterwards or whatever. I think that's a really good way forwards. Maybe even reducing the forces, so not doing divisi repertoire, but SATB, or even reducing further to SAB. Not dumbing down, but just managing the repertoire so that you've got things that are well known that you're bringing back, or repertoire that's reduced forces, and then maybe throwing in one challenging piece. So you're making, enabling the choir to grow at the same time. So those are the changes that I'm making quite a lot of at the moment.
Yeah, and I think part of this is there's obviously a need for us to manage our expectations. Things are not necessarily the same, but how do we then deal with that? And I think that's one of the significant issues. One of it, I guess, is in good planning, as Amy was saying, not expecting to be able to do exactly what we did before, but to choose perhaps a safer repertoire and understand it's going to take longer. But I think that can be tricky. I know in the children's choir world that 2 years of singers not being able to perform has a massive effect on the ability of the group, as well as I guess, the motivation of perhaps some of those mid-teens and older teens who've had some of the experiences that they've loved singing perhaps complex music in their choir, and then when they come back to choir, that they can't necessarily sing the same music because there's a big hole in the choir where there's been 2 years of lack of training. And I know that that has been an issue for many children's choirs. But I guess, as Tracy was saying, that in those cases, it's really up to the conductors to maintain faith and positivity and say, well, we can rebuild and we will rebuild, and you're here and you're a great singer, and together we can really do important things and get things back on track. Perhaps that's easy to say, but I know sometimes as a conductor, it also can be very frustrating, and sometimes we need ways to manage those expectations and those frustrations. Tracy, what's been your experience with your youth choir as far as, I guess, rebuilding after a couple of years where we haven't been able to have kids performing?
Well, firstly, the numbers have gone smaller for sure, as everyone has different circumstances, as we've all been mentioning. The age group that I work with are a little bit on the younger side of the youth choirs. So that has a different set of things that I would have to consider. Social anxiety or the need of wanting to do well, but then in front of people that we're not sure of, things that are so important to them during that developmental age that we need to nurture and support. So being online, some of them really thrive with that because it's in a smaller group, in a smaller cohort. They love it. They get to really speak up a little bit more. And it's a great opportunity to use Zoom. I think we're all almost experts at this point, where if my assistant is running the main choir rehearsal, I start pulling individual singers into a breakout room and we work one-on-one. It's like, let's work on your voice today. Let's check on what's going on. How is it this week? And then we just go back and forth on that. There are so many more things that we can do operationally that might be limited if, say, we have rented a space that only allows us to be in one room and then no other rooms are available. So sometimes this is what we do. And we are starting to embrace technology in ways that would actually help us so that, yes, we have a comfort of doing things what it used to be, but in a fresher take. So it's like a makeover for our choir and understanding our program. Everyone is feeling hesitant at first with listening to their own voice, trying to figure it out on Soundtrap, for example, but now people know that we can always use Soundtrap for practices. You can always mute someone if you don't want, and then you just practice on your own part. So there is more agency on the singer's part on how they want their choral experience to be. So as Amy has mentioned, constant communication with the singers on what they feel their comfort levels are in terms of stepping out of the comfort zone sometimes is helpful for us to navigate certain things. So
Tracy, are you still rehearsing online with your young singers?
We are all in person, thank heavens, and everyone, we're loving it. And no matter the circumstances of like, you got to stand there, you got to stand here, you got to mess, everyone's hungry to want to sing and will do anything. And I put myself up for to test the whole thing out as a singer. The first summer the pandemic happened, where we started to come back to some sense of normal and started singing in the parking lot with my friend's chamber choir, and the feeling is indescribable, where we can hear collective voices in our ears again, although we're masked. Then I could understand, okay, we will do whatever it takes to be singing together. So the theme is whatever it takes at this point.
Do we think some types of choirs have been more affected than others by the pandemic and the interruptions of the last couple of years? I guess we've talked a little bit about children's choirs, and youth choirs have certainly been impacted a great deal, partially because we're not only dealing with the singer's own expectations, but also the fears and perhaps the conservative nature of parents as well. But I'm also thinking of elderly choirs, where people would be, certainly over the pandemic, would have been reluctant to come to choir because they didn't want to be ill. And I can see Ken has joined us. Welcome. I'm also wondering, hello Ken, welcome. I'm also thinking, certainly in this country, some choirs have been able to receive some financial support during the pandemic, whereas other choirs have fallen through the cracks there and have not received any support at all, and are in quite a difficult situation at this point. So I'm interested in your thoughts there as to where do you see the most affected groups? And we'll come and talk to Ken about choirs in Kenya and Africa in just a moment. Amy, what are your feelings about that?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the Leith Hill Music Festival, which is currently happening right now. So Vaughan Williams set it up at the turn of the last century, and he set up all of the local village choirs that compete in the festival. And up until 2019, we would have 12 choirs competing over 3 days, so 4 choirs on each day. This weekend, so yesterday and today, we're now reduced to 2 days, and we were reduced to 6 choirs. And they are predominantly older choirs, choral societies. So we have lost a lot of singers. But also, I think it's the motivation to want to get back in the saddle so quickly and to compete so quickly. So I think some choirs are still very emboldened by that and want to move forward, and other choirs are being very, very cautious and very tentative. Some choirs have folded, some have disappeared altogether. I think smaller choirs, some younger choirs as well, if they were very small, then there has been a great risk that they will just disappear. And if they don't have supportive parents or committees, or perhaps the MD has decided that it's time to move on. And if the MD, which is often the case, has been the librarian and the treasurer and the repertoire committee and everything, if that person decides this isn't for me anymore, then that choir will fold. Or perhaps the MD set up the choir. So, it's very much a choir because of the individual that gave it its unique independence and stamp. So yeah, I do think some choirs have disappeared, and they're probably older choirs.
Okay. And Thomas, in Scandinavia, have you noticed that any particular type of choir is been more vulnerable to disruption, I guess, during the pandemic?
Yes, well, considering that we in Norway, the members of choirs are significantly getting older in choirs and not younger, this means that we have a predominance of senior choirs, elderly singers, more than youth choirs and children's as well. And since singing per se is not something you do in schools anymore in Norway, and there are quite few children's choirs. So the effect on them is percentage-wise much smaller than it is on elderly and senior choirs, senior citizens choirs. But again, this is very, very dependent on where you are in the country, and not in the least, as Amy is talking about, who the conductor is really, and as Amy is talking, what the conductor feels and does. I just visited last weekend a male choir in southwest of Norway, a coastal town, population of 11,000, and they have a male choir there with 94 active singers, and they have been intact throughout the whole pandemic. How did they do that? They didn't lose anyone, and the average age is quite high, as you would expect from a male choir like that. So I'm just so impressed. How did they do that? I mean, but they have really been working on connecting with them and facilitating different ways of working, being very creative and stimulating all along the process. So now they're back and they are so happy, of course. So in Scandinavia in general, it's hard for me to say. I don't know the situations in Denmark or in Sweden, but I think they would be rather similar to what it is in Norway. So, but then again, also we have had choirs who have lost members. And to be frank and very honest, some conductors and other singers say, thank God for that. That was about time. So they have lost singers that they kind of really wanted to get rid of anyway, but they didn't find a natural way to do that.
It must be an easier way, Thomas.
Some choirs have really reported to me that now they start functioning so much better because they are now, they can work more productively as they feel it. And also some choirs have reported that they have gained members actually during the pandemic. So very variable.
So Ken, welcome. And perhaps you could share with everyone, firstly, just a little bit about your work in Kenya. And I guess in your current work, you've probably come across choirs from all sorts of places and types. And perhaps tell us a little bit about how the pandemic has impacted you all over there and how you're all coping, how the conductors are feeling, how the programs are coping. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Mark. As you said, my name is Ken. I like to introduce myself as Ken from Kenya. So it's really a great pleasure to be with the committee here and to listen to all that is going on from around the world. I might not be an expert to talk about the rest of the world, but I think we share so many similar situations. I mean, COVID was the first thing that ever in my lifetime really affected the entire globe. I think it has been such a phenomenon that every sector of the society has been affected by COVID. You know, at the beginning, artists in Kenya really, really struggled, and there were even some demonstrations by artists to the government, asking the government to give assistance. We saw the government coming in strongly to give some subsidies to art groups, to individual artists. But that was still not enough. And so we saw in Kenya, particularly, we saw artists really struggle. Some of them went into depression because that was the only source of livelihood. I know that conductors that have been living off conducting, often they conduct a school, and they may not necessarily be on the staff of the school, and they conduct a church choir, They conduct a club choir, and often club choirs in Kenya do not pay. So you find that a conductor has to depend on the church and the school. So they do what I think most of us music teachers call peripatetic teaching. They move from one school to the other, they move from this church to the other, and that's how they had been making their living. That's all they knew, and they were surviving on that. And then, boom, COVID hit. First of all, these kind of people do not have a permanent contract with those institutions. Some of them, actually a majority, don't even have a contract with those institutions. They're paid on what is called petty cash, which is basically when you come in, you have agreed on a certain amount of money, and the institution signs off petty cash for you. They've been surviving that way. Now, you can imagine at the beginning of COVID, they have no contract, which means that income is just thrown out of the window. They have no recourse of any sort. They cannot go to the school and claim you have refused to pay me. They cannot go to the church, you have refused to pay me. And so a lot of conductors really struggled in the first 2 years because...
Ken, is that better now? Has the situation improved?
So I wouldn't say it has improved. I would say it is beginning to improve because Kenya just lifted all the protocols on COVID early this year, around about February. So the situation has not improved. It is just starting to crank the engines. And because the COVID protocols were lifted, then it means the school choirs are just coming back. However, they have not sorted out how they're going to progress from now on, which means all those conductors that were working with those schools are not necessarily back in those schools yet. The churches are only just starting to crank up their engines, so it means that they have not really figured out. And mark you, because of the reduction in the number of people that could attend church service at any one given time, it therefore means that there was revenue lost also for the churches. There was revenue lost for schools, some of which were private schools, and so students are not there anymore. Students have transferred to other places. So I wouldn't say that the situation has improved. I would only say that there is a new beginning.
That's good to hear. Tracy,
conductors are having, yeah.
Tracy, I'm thinking that many conductors in Malaysia and Singapore that I know are also peripatetic choir conductors, and this must have been devastating for them. Is that the case? And are things starting to improve there as far as getting back into the school choirs and things where I know a lot of people in Malaysia and Singapore do, and other parts of Asia as well, make a living in choral work?
Yeah, that was my job when I was in Malaysia, and that's how things would have gone during before the pandemic as well. And I would be so worried if I was still working in Malaysia at this time, trying to maintain a career, which is not a priority, but trying to survive during this time in so many ways. And from all my conversations with my colleagues and friends, and also Susanna, who's in Malaysia, that everyone is struggling, everyone is losing jobs. There is need to liquidate if needed, and needing to pull resources together and say yes to lower pay, which is better than zero pay. You know, circumstances force you to not be so particular in terms of how you take your jobs and your gigs during this time. So everyone is struggling, and I won't say from what I know that it is better, but everyone's trying to find ways to make it work, be it banding together to form a choir and to share profits, or just to make ends meet, or in other various creative ways, like putting a little festival together for the choirs to have a way of having choirs to sing, as opposed to just having, no, you cannot do this. So finding different avenues, yeah, to perform.
Tracy, do you think that might change the situation, and that they will be, your colleagues might be less reliant perhaps on schools and will try and create other income streams? Do you think that might happen, or?
I try to be hopeful about it, but I don't think it's going to look that way in the very near future, because everyone is still pretty worried. COVID is still around, and until that changes, then we can move forward.
Getting near the end of our discussion, and perhaps if we just have a little bit of a think about choral concerts in the COVID age. I know we've talked about this, and Amy was saying that they'd had experimented with short concerts, 1 hour, no interval. Like, that makes a lot of sense, and I think a lot of people are doing that. Ken, what are you seeing in Kenya as far as concerts going? Have you been able to start having concerts again with the choirs? Has there been changes as to how they look?
I'm on mute. Sorry, I was on mute. But yes, we are starting to have live concerts again. A lot of choirs had done, but right now we are starting to have a lot more live concerts and live rehearsals. Actually, I for one, I'm going to have my second live rehearsal in the next 2 weeks, because my choir has been out for the last 2.5 years. We tried a live rehearsal early January, and I got COVID a week after that. So we went back again into a recess. Yeah. So I have had a very personal experience with all that.
And very frustrating.
Very frustrating, extremely frustrating. Yeah.
Tracy, what about concerts? How are you thinking about that? Any changes to what the way you're approaching things there?
Very similar to Amy's, shorter concerts, that's one thing. Also thinking of the kind of repertoire that we would program that would be accessible to choirs, and accessible in this way would mean music that is, I won't say easy to put together, but it makes people feel good that we can do it in a short amount of time, given the circumstances. So balancing the difficulty levels and the kind of music we do. And if there isn't any, we advocate for new music by composers, so that the music needs to build fundamentals of singing and still have a balance of artistry and pedagogy. Neither should be a compromise. We can definitely make new music for that. And that it's okay to sing in unison. And I think everyone would love it. And if we have the congregational singing as well involved, that really solidifies the feel-good idea. And that's something that people can take away and understand, yes, this is why we need singing in the community. And definitely modifying expectations in that way. Also having backup plans. I cannot stress that enough. If there's anything else that I can take away from the entire experience, is backup plans and backup support. Yeah.
I guess that's become a major part of our thinking with concerts, isn't it? We will do this repertoire, but what will we do if this person's not available? Will we have 2 accompanists lined up who know the music, 2 conductors? Thomas, what were you going to add there?
Yeah, well, I so love what both Amy and Tracy says, and this is very, very much in line with what Elena Sharkova also said in this roundtable discussion we had that Matt Wright from Barnsley Youth Choir arranged last summer. It was about the same topic, and Elena, she also claimed that we have to go back to basics in what choral singing is. And I think, and to lower our expectations and ambitions and just go back to something, and that makes it easy for the audience to listen to and to approve of and to identify with. And I think this, what you say, Tracy, because we also have to think about this in a recruitment perspective. Since we're losing some singers, that doesn't mean that there are singers out there who are not good. And some singers are leaving one choir that is folded maybe, but they are still out there, and we just need to kind of catch them and reel them in again into another choir, maybe another function, but also potential singers who still haven't joined a choir. And there are more of them who are in the choirs, and that's where the interest really should lie. And if we do like Tracy say, that every concert from every choir should include joint singing a unison, the choir and the audience together. That could be building the bridge that maybe some from the audience would dare to tread and to go pass over into the choir. That should be compulsory in the future, from the nearest future.
We've had an interesting question from Matt Wright, and I'll read it to you, and then panelists can respond. The pandemic has forced us to reflect and reevaluate the work that we do. What has the panel learnt during this time about themselves, their practice, and those that they serve? And how has this informed and changed the way that they work? Has anyone had a midlife crisis, a choral nervous breakdown, all of that? But seriously, I think it's a really, really good question. I certainly felt at my first live rehearsal after 2 years, I said to the choir, I will do my best, but I'm not sure I can remember what to do. I was joking, but there was an element of truth in that as well. Does anyone have anything to share about that, what they've learned about themselves? I guess from a personal point of view, I think what I learned is that in a way, my determination to serve my singers increased. And I just thought to myself, we've all had a terrible couple of years, and I really would like to try and pay back some good times with these people. We owe them some good singing and choral fun, some great experiences, some fun rehearsals and all of that. And I certainly had a renewed determination to do my best to do that for my singers. Anyone else have any thoughts in response to Matt's question? Ken?
Yeah. I think Mark's question is really an important one. And for me, just like you, Mark, you know, I have really learned from this time how much I love choral music. And it's just felt like there's a big hole in my person, my entire person. I felt incomplete. I often felt like I am not a part of a certain community. I felt like I had lost a huge part of myself. And so it taught me that actually there is more to it than the music. When I met with my choir for the first time in person, I was so emotional to see all these people that I had not seen in person in 2 years. So I feel like the pandemic, for me, it taught me a very important side of me that I had never realized existed, which was the community that I had come to love so much. And it made me feel like I loved these people, not necessarily for just the music of it, but there was more in there that I had actually missed. Because if it is music, we did it virtually. We met every Sunday. We still met virtually, but that day when we met in person, I just I couldn't hold my emotions to see these people in person. Yeah.
And I think what Ken says actually goes to the heart of what makes choral music very special, in that our musical instrument that we work with as conductors is a bunch of people. And sometimes they're really annoying and sometimes they're absolutely wonderful, but whatever they are, they come together to do this thing that we call singing. And together we do something that we couldn't do by ourselves, which makes it super wonderful. And I think we do, as conductors, certainly create these bonds with our singers that I also have really missed in that time. Amy, what have you learned about yourself?
Well, I'm not going to joke when I say I was thinking about retraining in many, many different things. Maybe a Pilates teacher, maybe to be a homeopath. I was thinking of going into dog breeding, like anything other than choral music. There were so many things that I thought, I need to get out of this. I was so low. I was so depressed. You know, as you say, the choir is our instrument. The choir make the sound for us. We are silent musicians. Without our choirs, we're nothing. So yeah, I went through that whole process as well. And the whole 0 hours contracts for me, I had no security, nowhere. You know, I don't work for a university. I don't have any backup. So completely agree with Ken in the situation that you were describing. Felt really, really abandoned and completely at sea. And there was a knee-jerk reaction from me where I just thought, I'm giving it all up. You know, that's it. Drama. But actually, what you were saying, Ken, is absolutely right. When you get back in the room with your singers, it transforms you and it reminds you of who you are, why you do what you do, why you are so passionately in love with this activity that we do, and we're so privileged to do it. So yeah, for me, I've just gone back to what I did before, because that's what makes me happiest. That's what makes me tick, you know, people, empathy, leadership. Yeah. There's no better thing.
Tracy, how were you feeling?
What Matt has asked is what have I learned during this time about myself and how it informed me. Yeah. I learned how to take better care of myself. And I think that whatever we show up as in front of our singers would reflect and would mirror on the singers. So if I were to give my best self in service of the singers and the music, I have to take care of myself. And that is something that I haven't done a lot before. I always say yes to everything, but at the expense of my own health. So taking care of myself physically, mentally, and I just started doing full-on choir concerts again. And last week I pulled a shoulder muscle. I never had that before because we didn't do concerts for a long time. It takes 2 days to recover from a concert, where before that you just keep rolling, and that's fine. So taking care of myself mentally as well and having healthy boundaries, I feel is okay. And one of my mentors used to tell me that no is a complete answer, and it's okay to say no. It's also okay to reach out to other choral leaders, which is why we have ICCF at this time, because it is very lonely being a leader, because there's always usually one in a community. Who else do we turn to? So it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to reach out to other leaders and say that I am struggling. And it's so hard to put ego aside to say that. and to also remember that we are musical athletes, and that's why taking care of the self in so many ways is very important. I'm still learning.
Yeah, but it's a fantastic thing to be reminded of, just that need to look after ourselves and I guess discuss with our colleagues the issues that we face, and find actually it's not just us, that everyone's in a very similar position. Perhaps to wrap up this discussion, it might be really useful just to reflect on the COVID-related technologies that we have been using for the last couple of years. I'm thinking in particular online rehearsals. What happens now going forward? Do we give up our Zoom subscriptions and hope never to have to do that again, or do we embrace some of these technologies? I know in my teaching we've certainly used a lot more video than in previously, and I guess because it's easy to do that in an online setting, but often I thought, wow, actually I should do this in rehearsal as well more often, because it's a very powerful teaching tool that I'd never used in the past. So I'm curious to hear from you your relationship with this technology at the moment. I think both my singers and myself are a little bit over everything technological at the moment, but do recognize that the ability to be able to come together in a video type rehearsal is actually a very powerful thing, and could be very useful thing as a one-off going forward. I guess specifically for some things that work well in that context, like perhaps focusing on a new language. You could do that very easily in this environment where you don't need to hear each other sing, and so on and so forth. Yeah, what are your thoughts in those regards? Thomas, perhaps first.
Well, yeah, this is very, very much related to the question we got from Luciano Fiore, where he writes, hi everyone, I'd like to ask you if COVID-related technology has changed your strategies for managing choir rehearsals, or if you already used these means. And to me, I think, well, I did use a lot of it before. I used the breakout rooms function, however, not digitally. But that was because I'm fortunate to be in my university where we have several rooms to use. So I've used that method all the time, that methodology of dividing them into smaller groups in order to encourage learning processes on both an individual and group level, not always in the plenary session. So this, when Zoom came, for example, with the digital possibility for this, of course, that was a tremendous confirmation of the methodology in itself as a good way to work. And I hope that people continue to do that, because learning is going on normally 3 levels: individual, group, and plenary. And this is something where in a pedagogical setting we have to acknowledge, and also to help the singers to train them to take responsibility for their own learning, and not wait for the conductor to intravenously put this song into you. And this is something that I really do hope that we can learn from the technology and to implement it in the future. And of course, if we have 2 rehearsals per week, then you have more possibilities to switch between the 2 ways of working, which they can see that they can benefit from one another. So I think, I think it could be really, really beneficial to continue to work and to learn from what we have learned with Zoom, and to continue to use it in a sensible way.
I think what you say there about singers taking responsibility for learning their music, that technologies we've been exploring certainly there are no excuses for people now.
Exactly what you say, no excuses. I mean, I always set up my Zoom room, no, not always, but at least twice a month I set up the Zoom equipment. So people then people can be sick, they can be ill at home, but there's no reason not to be part of the rehearsal. So the efficiency can really go up, the efficiency rate, if we can use it like that.
And particularly important at the moment with the number of absences that we are all having in our rehearsals. Yeah. Yep. Amy, what's your relationship with the technologies, and how can you see them being used going forward?
I like to use Zoom as little as possible. Unless it's really useful for committee meetings, which have been transformational, just to, you know, be in your pajama bottoms and your slippers, for example, at a meeting is heaven, absolute heaven. So I think we will definitely continue to have committee meetings on Zoom. That's really useful. And I think things like repertoire discussions, and as you say, Mark, maybe learning a new language, that sort of thing. That's where Zoom can really come into its own. International teaching for me is super useful as well. Doing one-to-one, conducting lessons, amazing. That's very useful. Obviously, there's only so much you can do. Well, there's a lot you can do, but obviously you can't replicate the live interaction between conductor and singer in that circumstance. But one-to-one teaching has proven to be very enabling, very useful.
Right. Tracy?
My relationship with technology is a love-hate one. And there are moments where it's fantastic to use, and certain times I want to make sure there's none in the room when we are running a rehearsal. It's definitely a yes for ease of communications when we're connecting with folks who are not within our community. Seeing faces at times when a mask mandate is there. But it's also a good recruitment tool if I wanted to have voice assessments for people who'll be joining the choir and they cannot make it to the venue, then we could be as flexible as possible to run it at any point. What if some students are out of town but they are interested to join? Just hop on Zoom and we can figure it out from there. So what Thomas said was right. Using it in a sensible way would be helpful. And if there are times when the choir needs to meet when a venue is not available or circumstances happen, we know what our backup plan is at this point. So that ends up being a good fallback solution.
Ken, how is your relationship with the online learning environment? I think Ken's relationship with his internet connection might not be the strongest right now.
Can I just add something there, and also to Amy, for example? I mean, I find it very interesting that my singers, my young singers in D-flutes, that they prefer that I study a new piece on Zoom because they find it much more efficient, because they can sing all the time. They don't have to wait for the other parts, and that kind of triples the speed, really, and their possibility to take responsibility for their own learning. That they can try.
I think we've got Ken back now. Ken, what is your relationship with the Zoom technologies and the other technologies? Are you happy to see the end of it, or?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I think I'm having just bandwidth issues, and which brings me to the whole point. Technology is not really the best solution for our kind of music. You know, we are made to meet in person and do what choral music does best, which is build communities. But you know, before COVID, the only technology that I ever used, and the same as the rest of the panelists, I used WhatsApp. for recruitment purposes. We posted our call for auditions, and because we did not want to have an extra whole day listening to people, we had always used WhatsApp. We asked people to send their audition tapes on WhatsApp, and that's the extent to which we ever used technology. I'm happy to see it, but I think we're going to retain some aspects of it, and we will definitely continue using technology, but I think we're going to do that very minimally.
Great. Well, it's time to wrap up our discussion. So I'd like to thank all of the panelists very much, Thomas Caplin, Tracy Wong, Ken Wakia, and Amy Bebbington. Thank you so much for giving your time to share your experiences with your colleagues. I'm sure people will be very interested to hear, just get a snapshot of what's been happening in different parts of the world. I think the issues we've been facing are universal to different degrees, and the solutions that we're going to have to work out, can learn a lot from each other. So look out for more from the International Choral Conductors Federation. There will be, using this wonderful technology, many more events coming your way, and we hope that you'll be able to join us at one of those. Thank you, everyone, and good night.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark. Lovely.
Really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Bye, Tracy.
Bye,
Bye, Amy.
everyone.
Bye, Ken.
Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks, Mark.
Bye-bye.